green to North Carolina's pines. They walked those miles with hope still in their minds. With every step, the pain was hard to bear. Yet through the tears, they chose to persevere. In Tennessee, they felt the river's cold embrace. Their spirit strong, no hardship could erase. The land of ancestors fading in their view, but their hearts held firm, love for what they knew. On the trail of tears where sorrow met the land, they carried dreams within a calloused hand. In Oklahoma, they found strength in pain, survived the journey through the snow and rain.
This is the village of Salem in North Carolina. It looks very much like this today because it's a historic site. So if you want to come to Salem, this is what it looks like. And this is what it looked like during the days that the Moravians had the mission among the Cherokees in Spring Place, Georgia. But this is where the missionaries came from. There are things that are similar about the Cherokees and the Moravians, and you would never think, because the Moravians, oh well, did I do it? I didn't. Okay. Because the Moravians and the Cherokee had two things that were really very much in common. First of all, they were gender divided in their societies. Now, Cherokee women had work that they specifically did, and Cherokee men did not interfere in that arena. Moravian women did live the same way. And in Winston-Salem and in Bethlehem, the Moravian women were able to support themselves, which was very unusual during this time in history. The Moravian women had a girls' boarding school. They had a glove factory, and God bless their souls, they washed the single brothers' laundry. So they actually had more money than the single brothers. And at one point, when the tavern burned, had to lend the single brothers money to rebuild the tavern in Salem. And that was very important to the single brothers. Okay. So Abraham Steiner, which was a very good choice, is the one that talked the Cherokees into letting the Moravians come. But interestingly, the people that were involved in that council meeting had an agenda. James Vann was there, and many of you know who that is. There we go. Because the mission is founded right there at James Vann's house in Georgia, which I'm sure most of you have been to. Well, James Vann had children that needed to be educated. And I know you all know this house. The Cherokee were matrilineal, meaning that the descendant was traced through the mother, and children were members of the mother's family. Women had rights to the land and improvement. They farmed and maintained households. Cherokee women made decisions about the education of their children. The Moravians, like the Cherokee, worked in a gender-divided society. And I've already told you they had a school. And that school is a boarding school. But I don't want you to think when I say boarding school that it's anything like the boarding schools you know about. It was a boarding school where the governors, the political leaders, the judges sent their children. It was a very expensive boarding school. It was for girls only. This is the Single Sisters House in Salem. And this is actually on the wall of the building where the girls that came to Salem lived. The Moravian kids in Salem attended different schools. The boarding schools, as I said, was reserved for the wealthy planters because it was the income for the single sisters. Graduation was usually after kids had been there for 2 years. And the graduation was held in the church in Salem. Now, people came from all around into this little community. The community of Moravians, they were craftsmen. They were tinsmiths, they were shoemakers, they were craftsmen. They were potters, they were silversmiths. So people knew the town of Salem because they came there to buy things. The Moravians were not wealthy, but they were tradesmen. The graduation ceremony was held in home church, which is the building directly behind me. And when they had a graduation ceremony, people came from everywhere, even the boys from Chapel Hill. And I know this is hard to think about, but the University of North Carolina is a land-grant college. And those dang boys came to Salem even back then. So Salem was just full of people. And it was really interesting because those people were speaking all different languages. The Cherokee were speaking Cherokee. The African-American slaves that were in Salem were speaking different languages, different African-American languages. And of course the Moravians, they spoke German. Don't ask me how all this worked out because it's still a wonder to all of us. But just imagine coming into that community and finding all these languages going on, all these people in fine attire coming to see their children graduate and perform. And these Indians, it had to be a ton of fun. Mary and Martha McNair, and I think somebody mentioned the McNairs earlier, was the daughter of Delilah Van McNair, who is James Van's daughter. So James Van's daughter's children, his grandchildren, come to Salem to go to school at the girls' boarding school. And Martha McNair comes with her husband to Salem to go to the graduation, which I think is really interesting. She is the first woman, Cherokee woman that I know of, that came from the mission or anywhere to come to Salem to one of those affairs. The graduation was held in the church, and there was a platform built up. And the headmaster of the school would sit there, and the girls would each come up, and the headmaster would ask them a question, and that was a part of their examination. All the girls dressed in white. The things that they had done, their needlework, their artwork, was all hanging around the church so that the parents could see it. The girls also sang songs, but the girls had studied history, geography, biology, because the Moravians were really interested in educating women. Now, one of the reasons that the Moravians believed in educating women and men is because they thought the only way that you could learn about Christ and religion was to be able to read the Bible for yourself. So that was kind of the underpinnings of that. While Delilah was in Salem, the Moravians allowed her to take communion with the single sisters. Now that's a symbol that speaks so much. They saw her as a sister. They saw her as a part of their community, even though she was just a member of the mission, Spring Place Mission in Georgia. And if you've ever been on a tour Jack Baker's given you, he's taking you by the graves of Delilah Van and her husband. The third Cherokee girl to attend the girls' school was Sally Ridge. Major Ridge had requested many times, and you all know who that is, for his daughter to be able to attend the girls' boarding school. But the Moravians didn't think Major Ridge had enough money, and they didn't accept his daughter. Now, do you believe that? But guess what? His wife, Susanna, who was a member of the mission at Spring Place and was a woman of independent means, requested that her daughter be allowed to go to Salem, and the Moravians accepted her. So it was Susanna Ridge's money that got Sally Ridge in the Moravian school. Sally, like most kids, stayed 2 years. But she was shy, even though she had traveled around the country with her father. One of the teachers in Salem made this note about Sally Ridge when she was there. Sally appeared different from the other students. When outsiders came into the classroom, Sally was shy and looked away, always choosing not to address them. And at night, she took most of her clothes off and wrapped herself in a blanket to sleep. Both of her parents were Cherokee, and she likely practiced more traditional ways. But Susanna Ridge, her mother, doesn't seem shy when she comes to Salem for Sally's graduation. One of the school teachers is so impressed with Sally Ridge that she writes a description of the event. Susanna Ridge wore a man's fur hat without ornamentation and dressed very plainly, although neatly. But it was observed that the white ladies in their silks and satins left the seat of honor beside the principal on the front row for Susanna. The author of this account, a single sister and teacher, pointed out that while Susanna's clothes lacked the quality and ornamentation of the other women's dresses, they were certainly acceptable by Moravian standards. Describing Susanna as possessing intelligence in her own right, the teacher's comments suggest that she pursues Susanna as an equal. Susanna demonstrated her pride in Sally's education by her very attendance at that examination. Like the Moravian sisters, she valued women's education. Now, guys, can't you just see her acting like that? And don't you like to hear about an Indian woman doing something? The white ladies visiting the community to attend the children's examination literally did not know how to interact with a plainly dressed Cherokee woman who did not speak English, a situation Moravians were at ease with, although they spoke no Cherokee. The connection of the Cherokee women to the Moravians ran deeper than superficial appearances, for they were sisters in the mission at Spring Place. Chief John Ross, now we're getting closer to removal, and these girls that I have talked about so far came in the early years, and then there's a big break where we don't have any girls come from the Cherokee Nation. But it's getting close to removal. Okay, hey guys, I have got some great photographs of these girls. This is Sally Ridge. Now, Jack Baker says to me that some of these girls aren't particularly pretty stuff. And I just don't like it when he says that. I think that's the way men think, and it's just, they can't help it, I know. This photograph you've probably seen before, but some of these other photos you haven't seen, because we found them in the depths of the Moravian archives in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Chief John Ross and his delegation traveled back and forth to Washington, often going through Salem, while they were attempting to negotiate with the government. For years, Principal Chief John Ross fought against the Cherokee removal and the relocation of the nation to the west, the civilization of Native American tribes by the U.S. and the state governments continued in full swing. The Cherokee Nation was divided, however, and you know this story, into 160-acre plots which were sold by lotteries to whites. The lottery winners took the best homes first. Okay, so all these early girls that come to Salem, they are from a very wealthy class of Cherokee. And I want us to always think about that, because there were many other Cherokees who did not have money, that did not live in the style that the Rosses and many and the McCoys lived in. These girls, family wanted them to come. They wanted them to be educated, and they wanted them to be in school with these political leaders and their daughters. As the pressure of the Cherokee to move west escalated, Lewis Ross, now you know who that is, right? Because his house is right over here, and you rode by it. Wouldn't let me talk up there either. Well, Araminta Ross is the next child to come to Salem. Well, Araminta is Lewis Ross's daughter. And Araminta is just smart as a whip, because she later writes and does some really wonderful things after she marries a wealthy man. Timothy Vogler is here. And it wasn't until
1838.
until he did his research and we realized his name is.
He was returned talent that makes grants.
No, I'm talking about the guy that's speaking, who found out that the Moravians were taking guns in the wagons to the Cherokee Nation.
Stuart Martin.
Stuart Martin. Marshall, okay, this is really recent. Stuart Marshall, doing his research, all of a sudden, he starts talking about the gunsmith, Timothy Vogler, taking guns into the Cherokee Nation. Now listen, you're not going to find any of that in the Moravian records. You're just not going to find any of it. It was such a surprise to myself and certainly to Jack, because we've looked at just about every page of those old documents there is to look at. Well, all this time that the gunsmith is coming back and forth from Salem to the Cherokee Nation, and this is right at removal, he's taking guns down there. Now, I don't think they're using guns to fight. I think they need guns. I think they need guns on the trail, because they've got to kill rabbits and things they can eat. They need guns. They just needed guns. But Lewis Ross walked around often with a smile on his face, and the agent questioned why Lewis Ross was so happy. And it would usually correspond with the gunsmith. Anyway, Lewis Ross, as you know, got in a lot of trouble. You heard him talk about that yesterday. So Lewis talked the gunsmith into taking his daughter, Araminta, back to Salem. So Araminta rides in the gunsmith's wagon, the Moravian gunsmith, back to Salem to go to the girls' boarding school. And Araminta's only 10 years old. So he puts her in that wagon to ride on that rough road back to Salem. Less than a year after Araminta arrives in Salem, Ann and Cynthia Rogers, the daughters of John Rogers and Sarah Cordy, arrive at the girls' boarding school. The lottery winners have taken their parents' homes, as Georgians claim the best land first. And that's why these girls are coming, because these girls are from wealthy families that have land that certainly the lottery winners want. So this is Cynthia Rogers. Just a month later, Lewis Ross arrived in Salem with his niece, Jane, the daughter of his brother, Chief John Ross. Earlier, Chief Ross had returned home from Washington to find his family gone and the lottery winners in possession of his home. He wanted Jane educated and safe. Okay, guys, I really wanted to point yesterday. Does everybody remember where they pointed out John Ross's house? Remember that? Well, that's where Jane was, in a cabin with her mother. She was 13 years old. Her mother was an invalid. And yet, Lewis takes her to Salem to school, because that's how important education was to the Cherokees. Jane stayed 3 years. She developed strong relationships with the single sisters that will last for her entire life. Jane, later in life, lives among the Moravians in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania during the Civil War. Oops, there's Jane. On May 23, 1838, federal troops, the Georgia Guard and the Tennessee Volunteers began rounding up all the Cherokee and putting them in removal forts.
Carol, could you go back to the photograph and let us look at it in a moment?
Who do you want to see?
Jane Ross Meigs.
Yeah, okay.
Back.
Go back.
The back. The back end. Over on the top. Up there. Yes. There's text to read. There you go.
Well, thank you. I like it that you like my girls.
An advice to her from her chief. It's right there.
I'm sorry?
The text, the advice to her
Yes.
for behavior at school.
Oh, and this text is much longer than what we've shown here. It shows, John Ross's writings, when he writes about his children, and it's unlike his writings in the Ross paper. He is so kind and so thoughtful, and he is so much for educating those kids. And it's really important to you. Now, this would be his only daughter by Elizabeth Brown Henley, Cloudy, as she's sometimes called. But okay, now you're ready to look at the removal fort? Because I know you've not seen one of those, so let's just go on. This is Delilah Hicks, okay? Do you remember yesterday when we went by Elias Butler's house? Does anybody remember that? Okay, the Ross house was on our right, and then we went up the road a little bit, and that's where Elias Butler lived. Elias Butler was also a missionary, and there was a school up on the hill beside his house, but he lived almost within sight of John Ross's house. His wife is very important in the Cherokee story. Her name is Lucy. Now, Elias Butler goes on the Trail of Tears as a doctor. Am I getting out with this? Okay. Meanwhile, the Moravians in Salem receive a letter from Lucy Butler, a missionary friend of the Moravians from the American Board, who is still among the Cherokee. Now, she is still there in that house with little Turtle's 3 children, because their family has died, her own 3 children. And yet she has time to write and request that other schools take Cherokee girls and help educate them during the removal, because she knows that once they get to Indian Territory, they're going to need school teachers. So that's why all this push to educate these young women is so very important, because once they got there, the first thing they did was set up schools. Lucy asked the Moravians to accept George Hicks's oldest daughter, Delilah Hicks gratis, free in their school. The Hicks family were devoted members of the Moravian Mission. George Hicks attended the Moravian Mission School as a boy and had served as an interpreter for the Moravians for years. In case you haven't read it, one of the few letters that we have from the Trail of Tears is George Hicks writing back when they're on the edge. He's the 3rd detachment lined up trying to cross the Mississippi. Okay. The second letter, after Lucy Butler writes and asks that they'll take the Hicks girl, arrives, and it's written by George Hicks. And he says, please will you not just take my oldest daughter, but would you take my other daughter as well? Now these single sisters, they earned their living in that girls' school, and for them to take these 2 girls gratis is just unheard of that they did it. So George Hicks's daughters, both of them, went to the Moravian Girls School and stayed during removal. And George Hicks's youngest child died on the trail, so it was really wonderful that any kids they could get out of that situation was really a blessing. The Moravians accepted both girls gratis. On the eve of her removal, George Hicks traveled to Salem in a wagon to bring both his daughters to the safety of the Moravian sisters. He worshipped with the Moravians and returned to his people. This is a photograph we dug out of the Moravian archives as well, which I love. That's George Hicks. When George Hicks reaches his people after taking his daughters to Salem, he is asked to lead one of the detachments of 1,000 people who travel west on a long journey to Indian Territory. Chief Ross, not knowing the roundup has begun, stops in Salem on his way back from Washington to join the Cherokee people. He's on his way to join the people in Tennessee. Prior to leaving Salem, he attends home church on July 4th, 1838, with his Moravian friends. Chief Ross and Jane travel by stagecoach. While they're on the stagecoach, Chief Ross writes his friend John Howard Payne while traveling.
Exactly.
Quote, I arrived here in Salem in good health and had the satisfaction to find my daughter also well. The Moravians have 3 missionary gentlemen now among the Cherokees who will be close observers and will record the events of the time as will be important to be known. And then there's a pause. Evidently the stage stops. Having left Salem before closing this letter, I now avail myself of the earliest moment to mail it. The fatigue of stage travel and the want of rest, together with the chilly news occasionally received from passengers we meet on the road from the west, respecting the unhappy conditions of the Cherokee, makes it difficult for me to write you in any detail. This I must defer until I have reached the encampment of my nation. The honor of the removal remains well documented. The horror of the removal remains well documented thousands down the trail. Most are old or very young. The Cherokee lost not only their future, but their past by losing these generations of people. I don't think we can imagine the chaos the 13,000 Cherokee people experienced marching from Tennessee and Alabama to Indian Territory. We know they rebuilt their homes, they planted their crops, they reestablished their government, they rebuilt their schools and churches, and they successfully rebuilt their nation. After the arduous journey of the Cherokee Nation in Tennessee and Alabama, Lewis Ross and George Hicks returned to Salem and take their daughters to the Cherokee Nation in Indian Territory. Delilah Hicks goes on to teach in mission schools, Cherokee school, and correspond with her teachers at Salem until the end of her life. Jane Ross also remains in close touch with the Moravian sisters and teaches and follows in their steps by teaching and leading other women in Indian Territory. I think she was head of the women's division of the Indian Fair at one point. The relationship between the Moravians and the Cherokees did not stop with removal. Moravian men and women among the Cherokees did not remove with them. Rather, they go ahead of the nation, and the Moravian missionaries didn't go with the Cherokee. They went ahead of them in order to find a place to start a new mission in Indian Territory. The Cherokee girl's beloved teacher, whose name was Sophia Rudavogler, marries and travels west to teach in the mission school in what is New Spring Place, to those of you from Oklahoma, which you know is still there. And I'm really glad to say that that area where the Moravian mission was at New Spring Place, the Cherokee Nation has bought that property, and it will remain held forever, which I'm really glad. This is the plaque that we dedicated on our 250th. Salem was 200. The reason you're getting to listen to this talk is because the college was 250 years old. We now have a college, a girls' school that is directly descendant from the Girls Boarding School. And we're the only institution for women that has been in continual process for 250 years.
Where sorrow met the land. They carry dreams within a calloused hand. In Oklahoma, they found strength in pain.